The rain poured heavily over the crowded city, blurring the reflections of streetlights on the soaked pavement. A tall man in a charcoal suit stood under the glass awning of a luxury hotel, staring out at the people rushing past with umbrellas and hurried steps. His name was Ethan Cole, a self-made millionaire, CEO of one of the most successful tech firms in the country. But tonight, despite the world knowing him as a man who had everything, power, success, wealth, he felt painfully empty inside. The sound of laughter from families walking by stabbed at his chest like small, invisible knives. For years he had avoided human connection, burying himself in work after losing his wife and unborn child in an accident that had shattered his soul. Just then, a small voice rose above the storm, soft but trembling with courage. Excuse me. Ethan looked down to see a little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, drenched from the rain, holding a crumpled $5 bill and a small stuffed bunny missing one ear. Her clothes were old and torn, her shoes soaked through, but her eyes, those large brown eyes, held something that stopped him in his tracks. "Sir," she said again, looking up with a mixture of hope and fear, "here's $50. Can you please be my dad for one day?" The man froze. For a second, he thought he'd misheard her. The city noise faded, the rain slowed, and the world seemed to hold its breath around that little voice. "What did you say?" he managed to whisper. But the girl simply extended her tiny hand again, her lip trembling. "It's for the school event tomorrow," she said softly. "Everyone has to bring their dad." But mine went to heaven. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of love that heals the broken, please take a second to like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more stories that touch hearts like yours. Ethan stood motionless, his throat tightening. Something deep inside him cracked open, a piece of his heart he thought had died years ago. He knelt down so he could look into her eyes properly. Her face was pale from the cold, strands of wet hair clinging to her cheeks, but there was a strange brightness in her expression, a desperate hope that made him feel small and unworthy. He didn't know what to say. He hadn't spoken to a child in years, hadn't smiled genuinely in longer than he could remember. But something about this girl's innocence disarmed him completely. "Where's your mother?" he asked gently. The little girl looked away. "She's sick, real sick. I told her I could find someone for the school day so she doesn't worry." She lifted the crumpled bill again, as if proving she could pay for his time. "It's all I have. I promise I won't waste your time, mister." Ethan felt his chest tighten again. He had spent millions on mergers, on business ventures, on meaningless things. Yet this little girl was trying to buy a father's presents for $50. Without a word, he took off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. "Keep your money," he said quietly. "I'll be your dad for a day." The next morning, for the first time in years, Ethan woke up earlier than usual, not for meetings or deadlines, but for something entirely different. The little girl's name was Lily Parker, and she lived in a small, run-down apartment on the east side of the city. When Ethan arrived, carrying breakfast and a bouquet of flowers, he noticed the peeling walls, the flickering lights, and the faint sound of coughing from the next room. Her mother, Grace, lay on a worn-out bed, pale and fragile, but her eyes lit up when she saw Ethan. "You must be the kind man who agreed to help my daughter," she said weakly, a faint smile breaking through her exhaustion. "Thank you for doing this for her. She hasn't stopped talking about you since last night." Ethan, for a moment, didn't know how to respond. He had been called many things in life: CEO, visionary, tycoon, but kind wasn't one of them. He simply nodded, his voice catching as he said, "It's an honor to help." Lily twirled in her little blue dress, the hem frayed but her spirit unbroken. "Do I look okay, Mr. Ethan?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "You look perfect." As they headed to the school, Ethan felt something shift inside him. The sight of the little girl holding his hand so tightly filled a void that years of wealth and luxury couldn't. At school, whispers followed them. Parents recognized Ethan, the cold billionaire often featured on magazine covers, Yet today, there was warmth in his eyes, something human and raw. Lily introduced him proudly. "This is my dad," she announced to her classmates. Ethan froze for a second, then felt his heart melt completely. He knelt beside her and said softly, "That's right, I'm her dad." Throughout the day, he helped her with crafts, joined her in games, and watched her laughter echo through the halls. Each smile from her felt like sunlight breaking through years of darkness in his heart. When it came time for the father-daughter talent show, Lily hesitated. She whispered that she didn't have a talent to show. Ethan thought for a moment, then smiled. "How about we do it together?" They stood on stage as Lily read a short poem she had written, her voice trembling but full of emotion. A dad isn't just someone who gives you things. He's someone who stays and helps your heart grow wings. He doesn't need to be perfect or grand, just someone who'll hold you when you can't stand. When she finished, the crowd was silent for a moment before erupting in applause. Tears welled up in Ethan's eyes as he hugged her tightly. He hadn't realized how much he needed this, how much he had needed her. After the event, they went for ice cream, sitting on a park bench overlooking the playground. Lily laughed as the wind blew her hair around, and Ethan found himself laughing too, a sound he hadn't made in years. But beneath that laughter, something ached. He didn't want this day to end. As the sun dipped low, Lily looked up at him and said, "Mr. Ethan, thank you for being my dad today." He smiled gently, trying to steady his voice. "You don't have to call me that, Lily. You already have a real one in heaven." But Lily shook her head, her eyes shining. "I think God sent you today so I wouldn't feel alone." Those words broke him completely. When he dropped her home, he saw Grace struggling to get out of bed. Her health had worsened. Ethan called his private doctor immediately, arranging treatment without asking for permission. Grace tried to protest, but he simply said, "Please, let me help." He didn't know why, but the thought of losing this little girl's smile terrified him. Days turned into weeks. Ethan visited often, at first to check on Grace, but soon just to spend time with Lily. They painted together, watched movies, and sometimes she made him read bedtime stories. Slowly, the once empty penthouse of the lonely CEO began to fill with laughter again. His assistant noticed he was smiling in meetings now, not barking orders. Something about that small family had thawed the ice around his heart, but fate wasn't done testing him. One evening, when Ethan arrived at their apartment, he found Lily crying by the bed. Grace's condition had taken a turn for the worse. The doctors had done their best, but she didn't have much time left. Ethan held Lily close as she sobbed in his arms, whispering that everything would be okay, even though he knew it wasn't. In the following days, Ethan used every resource, every connection, to find a way to help Grace. But it was too late. One night, Grace called him to her bedside. Her voice was weak, barely audible. "Ethan, I know why you came into our lives," she said softly. "You think you saved her, but she's the one who's been saving you." He felt tears sting his eyes as she continued. "Promise me you'll take care of her. Don't let her feel like she's alone in this world. She needs a father. And maybe you need a daughter." Ethan couldn't speak. He held her hand as she smiled one last time and closed her eyes forever. The room fell silent, except for the faint sound of Lily's sobs. That night, Ethan sat beside her, watching her sleep, his heart heavy with grief, but also with a newfound resolve. A few days later, Ethan stood before a judge, papers in hand. He had filed for adoption. When Lily learned what he had done, she threw her arms around him, whispering, "Does this mean you're really my dad now?" Ethan smiled through tears. "Yes, sweetheart, forever." Months passed, and the once empty walls of Ethan's mansion became filled with photos, laughter, and the warmth of a new life. Lily brought color where there had been only shadows. Every morning, she'd run into his office with a hug before he left for work, and every night, he'd read her a story before bed. The world still saw Ethan Cole as a powerful CEO, but behind closed doors, he was just dad. Years later, on Father's Day, Lily, now a bright teenager, stood on stage at her school again. She looked out at the crowd and smiled as she read a new poem. Once I had $50 and a wish in my hand, to find a dad who'd help me stand. But God sent someone with more than gold. He gave me a heart that would never grow cold. He wasn't mine by blood or name, but he loved me all the same. Ethan couldn't hold back his tears. As the audience applauded, Lily ran to him and he held her close, whispering, "You gave me back my life." If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that remind us all of the beauty of love, kindness, and second chances. And before you go, tell us in the comments, would you have said yes if a little girl offered you $50 just to be her dad for one day? Because sometimes, one simple act of kindness can change two lives forever.